In this lesson, we'll finish up the texturing portion of our training by looking at how Substance can allow us to get a sort of painted texture type of a look with a more procedural kind of a workflow. So let's actually use our little pipes here as our example. So let's go into our rendering editor's Hypershade, and we want to use something called Substance. So if you kind of scroll down a little bit, you'll see Substance located right here. If you don't see it, you can go into Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and you just want to make sure that Substance is loaded up. So once we've got that available, let's go ahead and click on a Substance. That'll bring up this little blank Substance, and we don't have an actual Substance loaded up yet, so we need to double click on this. I'll bring up our attributes, and we have the ability to now enter a Substance file. So let's go ahead and navigate. And we want to actually navigate to our program files where your Maya installation is located. And inside there you'll find a folder called Substances. And you want to jump in there and you'll see there's all different kinds of substances that you can create. So I'd encourage you to play around with all of these different substances. Okay, and you can see you've got things from wood, different kinds of wood, to different kinds of leather, steel, scratch concrete, rusty floors, things that go well beyond the procedural maps that we were looking at, ramps and grids and things like that. Pavement, metal, painted metal, old concrete, moss, rock, gray sand. There's all kinds of stuff in here that you can have a lot of fun playing with. Let's take a look at the aircraft metal. We'll just use this as our example. So we'll go ahead and load that up as our substance. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and just hit Create Shader Network. And that's going to come in and actually create a network of textures here. So if you look at this, we have our shader, our material, and then we also have a normal map, which is kind of like a bump map. We have a diffuse color, and we have specularity. And all this is driven by our substance, so that if I change one aspect of it, everything else changes. So all these maps are interconnected. If we had actual texture maps that we had painted, we would have to go in and modify each texture map separately. Well, let's go ahead and assign our material to our pipe here. And I want to I'll turn on high quality here. Okay, so once we have that, you can also, if you want to use IPR, you can use IPR as well, but we want to go in and actually start to add and modify some of the substance attributes. So we'll jump into Substance, and we have substance parameters here. Okay, so right now we have a single tile. Let's go ahead and increase the number of tiles. And you can see as we increase those, you can start to see seams. So we take that up to 4. You can see we're starting to see some of the seams, and that is modifying the specularity, it's modifying the diffuse, and the normal map. That's all being taken into account. Okay, we also can increase the amount of scratches, which is a little bit hard to see, but you can kind of see that in there. We can randomize it, change the randomization by changing the random seed. We can increase the effect of the normal if we want to do that. We can also shift the hue. So let's say we don't like this color for the pipes. We can go ahead and shift that hue to a color that works better for us. Same thing with the saturation. We can play with the saturation and the luminosity and the contrast. Okay, take some of these values down a little bit more. And let me go ahead and take that down towards 0. And so we're able to get something with these bolts and with these seams that would have required us to paint a map, but instead we're able to use a pre-made substance, change a few attributes, which is kind of a hallmark of something that's procedural, your ability to just change it based on these values, and it automatically updates all of these maps. Now once we get something that we do like, we can actually can create a map out of it. And so what we can do is go into our substance, and let's say we want to just export images to disk. So we'll go ahead and hit that. We'll find a path, and we'll plug these into our source images folder, and we can just call this something like pipes maybe. And actually we want to actually select the folder and then put the, it'll go ahead and automatically name it. You just want the folder in there. So we don't want to necessarily create the shading network. We can, or we can create our own shading network. We can decide the size of the maps. So I'm going to go ahead and change those to 1K. Keep the aspect ratio, and let's go ahead and export that. Okay. So now what's happened is we've actually got, we map this, we've actually got several file textures now that have been baked out and are now associated with this map. So if we were to go in and assign this new map, you can see that instead of using the substance, it's now baked that down into a single map. So here is a single diffuse color map that we can modify. You can see the location and the naming of that map here. Okay, here's a specular and here's a normal that it's created. So it's taken that procedural type of a substance and baked it down into specific maps that we can then, they're really portable. You can take those and apply them and take them to another application, and then they can follow along with your project or wherever it goes after this. Okay, so that's a quick look at using Substance. I'd really encourage you to kind of check that out and play around with it, because there's a lot of great types of substances that you can start to add to your models. All right, so this brings us to the conclusion of our materials and texturing. Now you will, as you go through this process, you will eventually get into the rendering stage, which will involve lighting and things like that, and you'll be talking more about materials as you go through that process. We've just been kind of using the default setup and the default lighting. Okay, but we've looked at how to add file textures. We've looked at using procedural nodes and ramps and simple materials, and just kind of scratched the surface of adding this kind of surface detail to our geometry once we have it modeled. Okay. So I hope you've had a good time. The next step will be for you to take what you've got here and start to learn how to rig and animate it. So setting up controls and learning how to set keys and getting this to start moving around and being able to move some of the pieces around it as well. And so in the next section, Delano is going to take you through that process. So enjoy the rest of your journey in Maya 2013.